In 1991, 17 climbers disregarded the opposition of the local Tibetan people and insisted on climbing the mountain, only to be caught in an avalanche with none surviving. Over the past 30 years, this story has been embellished and become increasingly vague. However, last year, a person named Noeuki Kobayashi revealed the true story of what happened. It turns out that the truth itself is already shocking enough, without the need for legends. On January 3, 1991, at the base camp, the static noise was very loud and visibility was poor. The snow thickness was 1.2 meters. Intermittent voices came from Camp 3. They were saying that they had to bleed every 2 to 3 hours, and if this continued, the snow thickness might exceed 2 meters. Nothing could be heard clearly. The base camp asked if it was a battery issue and requested a battery change. After a while, a voice came through the static. "We have changed the batteries." Is it due to the humidity caused by the heavy snow? The static grew louder. The voice from Camp 3 said, "Let's terminate the communication, goodbye." The base camp replied, "Goodbye." The communication ended at 10:15 p.m. The next morning at 9 a.m., the base camp sent a timed request for a response and called each climber's radio, but none of the 17 devices responded. This situation was immediately reported to the Chinese Mountaineering Association and then to the Japan Alpine Club. For the entire day, there was no response. On the third day, the weather worsened and everything above Camp 3 was covered in fog and heavy snow. At the same time, rescue teams from Beijing, Lhasa, and Kyoto were rushing to the scene, delivering rescue equipment to base camp. On the 4th, 5th, and 6th days, the news of the loss of contact began to appear in the media. On the 7th day, a reconnaissance aircraft from the Chinese military flew to the site, but could not obtain any useful information beyond the clouds and snow. By this time, the rescue teams had also arrived. The Beijing rescue team first reached the area, clearing a path to Camp 2 and Camp 3, and climbed up to 4,100 meters. When the Lhasa rescue team arrived, they continued the search, reaching 5,300 meters. The Beijing rescue team then moved to the northern slope Civilian Glacier, climbing up to 4,400 meters. The Japanese rescue team, arriving third, assisted the Lhasa team. Military aircraft from Beijing were on standby 20 fusers, and after multiple aerial surveys, they found signs of an avalanche around Camp 3 but no sign of the camp. Meanwhile, the weather continued to deteriorate. On the 22nd day of the loss of contact, due to the increasing risk of avalanches from continuous snowfall, the rescue operation was terminated, and the accident was officially announced. The 17 members of the Sino-Japanese joint climbing team perished, making it the second largest mountaineering disaster in human history, known as the 1991 Miley Snow Mountain Tragedy. Kobayashi should have been part of the climbing team but changed his plans due to training. His two friends, Shunichi Sakurongdu's Kakodama, went instead. On the day the disaster was announced, he was assigned to visit Shunichi's family. Shunichi's mother spoke calmly about her son without shedding tears. Shunichi's father even invited Kobayashi for a drink. The elderly man laughed and talked about his son, but Kobayashi couldn't say a word. After drinking, Kobayashi formally reported the entire rescue process. Shunichi's father thanked everyone formally and finally said, 21 years is a short life. Only then did all the grief pour out, and Kobayashi couldn't stop his tears. From that day on, his belief in conquering the mountain became even stronger than before. In the preface of Kobayashi's story, he mentions that Western civilization has developed rapidly over the past few centuries, establishing a fundamental logic that divides the world into the living and the non-living. The exploration movement that emerged 600 years ago follows the logic of the living conquering the non-living. Why do humans climb mountains? It is a challenge from civilization to the wilderness and the primitive, using the greatness of nature to highlight personal value. The Japanese accepted this logic early on, although they also revered mountains. The new generation from Kyoto University had long abandoned these old ideas, and the mountain club continuously challenged one snowpad peak after another. By the 1980s, they were one of the top climbing teams in Japan. Coincidentally, China was also developing mountaineering, leading to this joint Sino-Japanese expedition. The advance team arrived at the foot of the mountain in 1989. When they explored and climbed to 5,400 meters on the northern slope, they encountered an ice waterfall. Everyone was excited because the mountain was neither too high nor too low, making it suitable for a team to reach the summit. This was exactly the effect the Sino-Japanese joint climbing team wanted. Additionally, it was a virgin peak, never climbed before. The advance team marked the location on the map and decided, "This is it, Miley Snow Mountain." In November of the following year, the Sino-Japanese climbing teams met in Kunming. The Japanese team consisted of 11 people, all from Kyoto University, including current students and alumni. The Chinese team had 6 members with 2 representatives each from the Chinese Mountaineering Association, the Yunnan Mountaineering Association, and DEQ County. On December 1, a team of more than 30 people entered the village at the foot of the mountain and began setting up base camp. Base camp was located at Xiaolong Ranch, a grassland paradise in the valley. From an aerial view, it was the outlet of a massive ice cirque, where glaciers poured down 2,300 meters. Planning would involve us ending through this ice cirque. Later, it was confirmed that this was one of the reasons why Miley Snow Mountain was so difficult to judge. The vertical drop was significant, over 3,200 meters, while the base camp of Everest was at 5,300 meters with a relatively gentle snow route to the summit, making the climb not as difficult as Miley Kawagarbo. Another issue was that Miley Snow Mountain was one of the main peaks of the Hangduan Mountains, very close to the Indian Ocean. The Hangduan Mountains act like a screen, with cold air from the Qinghai-Tibet Plateau in Siberia and warm currents from the Indian Ocean colliding here. The climate here is highly variable, with a range from tropical deserts with cacti to subaplan forests. The weather can change in an instant, from clear skies to avalanches. Climbing under such conditions is extremely dangerous. On December 8, the climb began. Just as they set up Camp 1, various problems started to occur, mainly with the transport team. These local Tibetans, hired temporarily, complained that the transport route was too dangerous and frequently protested, even going on strike. Although the protests were stopped with the help of the local county governor, the Japanese team noticed something odd. The transport team, while complaining about the danger, was taking even riskier actions, such as descending the ice without crampons and rappelling without decelerators. Any slight reminder from the climbing team would cause anger. Relations became very tense. During this period, the Chinese representative was particularly anxious but only told the Japanese team that the transport team must not be provoked, as this was their sacred mountain. If any problem occurred, the local people would first target the climbers. This is the origin of many of the legends about the Tibetan people obstructing the climbing team. Tibetans initially welcomed climbers to Yolong village, mistaking their target as Miley Snow Mountain. Conflict arose when they learned the goal was Kawagarbo, a sacred peak central to Tibetan belief. Legends depict it as a demon-turned-deity, with circumambulation believed to cleanse karma. Kawagarbo was anciently called Taizai Snow Mountain, symbolizing a prince's duality. Its misnomer Miley stems from a 1960s translation error, erasing its true identity. When Camp 3 was established, there was a serious disagreement within the climbing team. The Chinese captain believed that the Japanese team's choice of location was amateurish, as they set up camp on the mountain slope, where an avalanche would leave no chance of escape. The Chinese captain strongly insisted that Camp 3 should be set up away from the mountain, as it was a matter of life and death. The dispute lasted from the 15th to the 20th. The Chinese captain even suggested that if the Japanese team insisted, they should set up separate camps. The entire climbing process was stalled due to the dispute. 2 days later, an unexpected resolution occurred. We don't know the details, but from the diaries of the climbers, we learned that the Chinese captain simply replied with an okay and moved the tents to the Japanese side. The huge dispute was unexpectedly resolved. This location of Camp 3 was the last place where the 17 climbers communicated with the base camp. The following Friday, Camp 4 at 5,900 meters was established. On the 28th, a 5-person assault team left Camp 4 in the early morning to attempt a summit push. By 1 p.m., the team reached 6,470 meters, just 270 meters from the summit. But suddenly, a snowstorm hit, reducing visibility to just a few meters. The team requested instructions via radio, and the Japanese captain ordered them to wait for a 2:30 p.m. weather update. At 2:30 p.m., the order to retreat was given, as the weather showed no signs of improvement. By then, the weather on the summit had become very bad, and the descent route was no longer visible. The team stayed in a makeshift tent for 6 hours. At 10 p.m., they began distributing food, preparing to stay put. Suddenly, at 10:15 p.m., the moon appeared, and the weather improved. The team seized the opportunity, found the route, and descended. By 11:30 p.m., everyone was back at Camp 4. Over the next 3 days, the weather was excellent, and the team felt they could reach the summit with a final push. However, as this was a joint expedition, they had to follow orders. On the 30th, the assault team descended from Camp 4, and the 17 members gathered at Camp 3 to decide the order of the summit push. On January 1, heavy snow began to fall, and the snow outside the tents at Camp 3 grew thicker. The team started shoveling snow. By 9 p.m., the radio signals became worse, and the snow depth reached 1.2 meters, while the height of the Camp 3 tents was only 1.5 meters. At 10:15 p.m., the last communication, as described at the beginning of our story, took place. Since there were no survivors, we do not know exactly what happened at Camp 3, but an avalanche is the most plausible explanation. In 1996, the Sino-Japanese joint team returned to the mountain to challenge Kawagarbo again, and Naoki Kobayashi was part of the team. However, for over 10 days, they couldn't even enter Yubang village. The Chinese representative tried to mediate, but the local Tibetans insisted that the villagers in the region suffered greatly from doom since the 1991 expedition. Climbing activities would not be allowed anymore. It wasn't until October 30, under the protection of police forces, that the climbing team finally entered the Zhaonan base camp. This time, there were no local Tibetans to assist with transporting supplies. The team had to hire for Sherpas from Nepal. Camps 1, 2, and 3 were re-established. When they reached Camp 2 and 3, Kobayashi said, "Walking alone, I couldn't help but think of the 17 teammates who perished. Are you here below?" The rest of the words stuck in my throat. Wearing crampons, I continued forward and asked, "Why stay in such a cold place?" The biting wind howled, and the second challenge proceeded in the solemn atmosphere. Meanwhile, local residents on Friendlands makes this expedition extremely difficult. On November 18, the climbing action officially began. The Sherpas performed their blessing ceremony, hanging prayer flags and burning incense to protect against avalanches. Unfortunately, this expedition attempt failed due to bad weather when they advanced steam away from the summit for 100 m. 2 years later, news of the discovery of climbers' remains on the glacier reached Japan. Kobayashi immediately contacted the recovery team and volunteered to return to Miley's Snow Mountain. For the next 18 years, Kobayashi lived in the village Mingyong for recovery of all bodies of the expedition team. During the 18-year search, Kobayashi found the remains of 16 teammates, but the 17th teammate's remains weren't ever found. Kobayashi had vowed to find all 17, but now he has come to terms with it. When asked about the 17th teammate, Kobayashi said that the glacier moves 200 to 500 meters per year, 10 times faster than normal glaciers. If the remains haven't appeared, they may have been carried away by the glacier into the river. His answer was filled with acceptance. Perhaps for Kobayashi, this is a return to nature. Kobayashi says that living at the foot of Kawagarbo has given him a deeper understanding of life. This is the truth of the Miley Snow Mountain story. Perhaps when we truly see the mountain and the glacier, and feel the purity of nature, we too will gain a clearer insight. Thank you for listening to today's story.